The Barrett M82.50 caliber sniper rifle weighed 32 pounds fully loaded, which was why most operators used it from fixed positions with bipods deployed and sandbags for support. Staff Sergeant Emilia Barnes was carrying hers at a dead sprint across 200 meters of open ground, while enemy fighters poured machine gun fire at the landing zone that 12 trapped Rangers desperately needed cleared. The radio transmission had been quiet, resigned, the kind of tone that came from professionals who'd accepted they were about to die. Overwatch Reaper 6, extraction impossible, LZ is too hot, we're pinned, ammunition critical, 4 wounded. Tell our families. Barnes had cut them off mid-transmission. Reaper 6, Shadow 7, extraction is not impossible. I'm clearing that LZ. Mark your position and stay low. There'd been a pause, then disbelief in the response. Shadow 7, there are at least 30 hostiles with interlocking fire on the only LZ within 3 clicks. No way one shooter clears that. Barnes had smiled grimly, checking the 10-round magazine in her Barrett. Reaper 6, you've never seen what a Barrett does to people who think they're safe behind cover. Watch and learn. Shadow 7 is going weapons hot in 30 seconds. What those Rangers didn't know, what the enemy definitely didn't know, was that before Barnes had been one of JSOC's most effective long-range precision shooters, she'd been a competitive powerlifter who could deadlift 300 pounds and sprint while carrying weight that would cripple normal soldiers. The Barrett wasn't just a rifle to her. It was an extension of will, a tool for reshaping battlefields, and she was about to demonstrate that sometimes one shooter with the right weapon could do what entire platoons couldn't, clear a hot landing zone through overwhelming precision firepower that turned cover into coffins. The operation had started as routine, which in military terms meant about to become catastrophically complicated. 12 Rangers conducting village clearance in the mountainous border region between Iraq and Syria, standard counterinsurgency work that they'd done hundreds of times. Intelligence had said, light enemy presence, minimal threat, supportive local population. Intelligence had been catastrophically wrong about all three. The village had been a trap. The supportive local population had been evacuated days earlier. The light enemy presence had actually been 40 well-trained fighters with prepared positions, a mix of Syrian and Iraqi militants who'd been using the border region as a staging area. And the minimal threat had included heavy weapons, coordinated tactics, and communications equipment that suggested professional military training rather than irregular insurgents. The Rangers had walked into a kill zone designed specifically to destroy American patrols. They'd fought their way to a defensible position, a partially collapsed compound on the village edge, but they were surrounded, taking casualties, and running low on ammunition. The only landing zone large enough for helicopter extraction was a flat area 200 meters from their position, completely exposed to enemy fire from 3 directions. The terrain was brutal. Rocky hills, sparse vegetation, the kind of Middle Eastern landscape that provided excellent defensive positions and limited avenues of approach. The village itself was built into the hillside, with stone buildings that had stood for generations and provided natural fortifications that modern militaries would struggle to construct. Staff Sergeant Emilia Barnes had been 3 kilometers away when the situation developed, conducting Overwatch for a different operation that had completed successfully. She'd been packing her gear, preparing to move to the extraction point when the emergency transmission came through. Any coalition forces, this is Reaper 6, 12 Rangers pinned in compound, coordinates follow, 4 wounded, ammunition critical, enemy force approximately 40 fighters with crew-served weapons, requesting immediate QRF and air support. Barnes had checked the coordinates, 3 kilometers from her position, terrain she knew well from previous operations in the region. She'd checked her ammunition, 10 rounds of .50 caliber in the Barrett, 8 magazines for her M4 carbine, 2 grenades. She'd checked the tactical situation. QRF was 20 minutes out minimum. Air support was engaged elsewhere supporting operations in Syria. The Rangers had maybe 10 minutes before being overrun. She'd made her decision in 3 seconds. Reaper 6, Shadow 7, I'm 3 clicks from your position, moving to provide precision fire support. Give me a sit rep on the LZ. The Ranger team leader, Lieutenant James Morrison by his call sign, had responded with the kind of exhausted professionalism that came from leading men who were about to die. Shadow 7, appreciate the response, but LZ is completely exposed. We've got enemy positions in 3 buildings overlooking the zone, at least 6 crew-served weapons, and they're dug in deep. We tried to break out twice, lost 2 men, gained 0 ground. Extraction is impossible unless we can suppress all 3 positions simultaneously, and we don't have enough shooters or ammunition for that. Copy that, Reaper 6. What's your ammunition status? Down to 4 mags per man, less for the wounded. Maybe 3 minutes of sustained fire, then we're throwing rocks. Barnes had started running. 3 kilometers with 32 pounds of Barrett, 20 pounds of additional gear, across mountainous Iraqi-Syrian border terrain at altitude. Most soldiers couldn't have managed half that distance. Barnes had been running ultra-marathons for years and training with weighted gear specifically for situations like this. The terrain fought her every step. Loose rocks that shifted under boots, steep inclines that burned her legs, the thin air at elevation that made every breath feel insufficient. But she'd trained in Colorado mountains at even higher altitudes, had conditioned her body for exactly this kind of physical demand, and she pushed through discomfort that would have stopped most operators. Reaper 6, I'm moving to elevated position overlooking your LZ. ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold for 12 minutes? There had been gunfire in the background of Morrison's transmission, shouting, the sound of men fighting for their lives. Shadow 7 will hold. We don't have a choice. But I need you to understand. Those enemy positions are hardened. Concrete walls, sandbag fortifications, interlocking fields of fire. I don't know what you're bringing, but unless it's an AC-130, I don't think one shooter can clear that LZ. Barnes had checked her Barrett, felt its weight, calculated what 10 rounds of .50 caliber could accomplish in the right hands. Reaper 6, I'm bringing something better than an AC-130. I'm bringing precision. Shadow 7 moving to position. She'd covered the 3 kilometers in 11 minutes, a pace that would have impressed Olympic athletes while carrying 60 pounds of equipment across terrain that averaged 15-degree inclines. When she reached the elevated position she'd identified from map study during the run, she was breathing hard but steady, her heart rate controlled through years of cardio training that had prepared her for exactly this kind of physical demand. The position was perfect. A rocky outcropping 700 meters from the landing zone, elevated 30 meters above the valley floor, with clear sight lines to all 3 enemy positions that were suppressing the LZ. She could see the Rangers' compound, could see the enemy fighters in their fortified positions, could see the landing zone that was currently being raked with machine gun fire from multiple angles. The Middle Eastern sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley, creating the kind of lighting conditions that most shooters hated, but that Barnes had trained extensively in. The thermal shimmer from heated rocks would affect ballistics. The changing light would complicate range estimation, but she'd accounted for both in her calculations. Barnes deployed her Barrett, set up the bipod, ranged the distances. Position 1, northeast building, 650 meters, 2 PKM machine gun teams. Position 2, east compound, 700 meters, 1 DSHA heavy machine gun, multiple riflemen. Position 3, southeast structure, 620 meters, at least 3 machine gun positions plus riflemen. Approximately 30 enemy fighters in hardened positions with interlocking fields of fire, all focused on preventing helicopter access to the only viable landing zone. The kind of defensive setup that normally required artillery or airstrikes to suppress. Barnes had 10 rounds in her Barrett. She did the math. It was going to be close. Reaper 6, Shadow 7 in position. I have eyes on all 3 enemy positions. Prepare for fire mission. When I engage, you shift your wounded to the LZ and prepare for immediate extraction. I'll suppress long enough for birds to get in and out. Shadow 7, I appreciate the attempt, but those positions are hardened. You're one shooter. They're dug in with heavy weapons. This is suicide. Barnes chambered the first round, felt the Barrett's mechanisms click into place with precision engineering. Reaper 6, 2 things. 1, I'm not attempting anything. I'm completing a mission. 2, they're not dug in. They're trapped in positions where they think they're safe. Big difference. Stand by. She'd selected her first target, the DSHK heavy machine gun in position 2. The .50 caliber DSHK could shoot down helicopters and had been the primary threat preventing extraction. The crew had set it up behind a concrete wall with only the gun itself and the gunner's head exposed, a position that would defeat most small arms fire. The Barrett M82 fired a .50 caliber round with enough energy to penetrate concrete walls. Barnes aimed not at the gunner but at the concrete wall 3 inches below his position, calculated the angle for the round to penetrate and deflect upward into the gunner's position. She controlled her breathing, felt her heart rate steady at 52 beats per minute, adjusted for wind that was gusting from the west at 8 kilometers per hour, compensated for the thermal effects that would push her round slightly right. All calculations done in 3 seconds, informed by thousands of hours of training and actual combat experience. She fired. The Barrett's report was massive, the recoil significant even with the rifle's sophisticated dampening system. 700 meters away, the concrete wall exploded into fragments as the .50 caliber round punched through it, deflected upward through the gunner's torso, and kept going through the DSHK's ammunition feed system. The DSHK exploded as its ammunition cooked off. The gunner and his assistant were killed instantly. The heavy machine gun that had been the primary threat to helicopter extraction was eliminated with 1 shot. Barnes worked the bolt, chambered the second round, shifted to position 1. The PKM crews there had seen the DSHK explosion and were adjusting, trying to locate the threat. One team was repositioning their weapon. Barnes didn't give them time to complete the movement. Her second shot hit the PKM's receiver, penetrating the weapon's mechanisms and rendering it inoperative while sending fragments into the 2-man crew. The PKM fell silent. The second PKM team in position 1 went low, behind sandbags they'd carefully constructed for exactly this situation. Barnes shifted her aim 6 inches lower than their protective cover, fired her third round through the sandbags that were designed to stop rifle rounds, but not .50 caliber anti-material rounds. The gunner dropped. 3 shots, 3 crew-served weapons eliminated, 7 rounds remaining. At least 25 enemy fighters still active, and now realizing they were under attack from a precision shooter who was defeating their fortified positions. They did what trained fighters do when under sniper attack. They spread out, took better cover, made themselves harder targets. In position 3, the 3 machine gun teams repositioned to different firing points, presenting only minimal exposure. Barnes adjusted her tactics. She couldn't see them well enough for clean shots, so she'd make them come to her. She aimed at the building's support structure in position 3, a load-bearing wall that was keeping the partially collapsed structure stable. Her fourth shot hit the wall at its weakest point, exactly where structural stress was highest. The .50 caliber round didn't just penetrate, it created a failure point in already damaged masonry that had been weakened by years of conflict in the region. The building didn't fully collapse, but a section of wall gave way, exposing 2 machine gun positions that had been behind cover. Barnes worked the bolt, fired her 5th round into the first exposed position, eliminated that threat, 6th round into the second exposed position. 2 more machine guns silent, 6 shots fired, 6 major threats eliminated, 4 rounds remaining. Approximately 20 enemy fighters still in the battle, but their heavy weapons were gone and their hardened positions were proving less safe than they'd thought. Reaper 6, Shadow 7, primary threat suppressed. Move your wounded to the LZ now. I'm engaging remaining hostiles. Morrison's voice came back with renewed hope. Shadow 7, I don't know who you are or how you're doing this, but we're moving. Give us 90 seconds. Barnes shifted to her M4 carbine, leaving the Barrett with 4 rounds remaining for emergency situations. The remaining enemy fighters were infantry with AK-47s and light weapons, dangerous in numbers but manageable with precision rifle fire from an elevated position. She engaged methodically, using her M4's optics to identify and eliminate threats. A fighter trying to reposition to engage the Rangers, moving to the LZ, 2 rounds, center mass. Another fighter setting up to throw a grenade, headshot before he could complete the throw. A group of 3 attempting to coordinate an assault, controlled bursts that scattered them and eliminated their coordination. The enemy was realizing they'd lost the initiative. Their heavy weapons were destroyed, their hardened positions compromised, and an unseen shooter was eliminating anyone who exposed themselves enough to threaten the extraction. Some broke and ran, fleeing back across the border into Syria where they thought they'd find safety. Others tried to maintain the fight, but with decreasing effectiveness as Barnes continued to engage from a position they couldn't easily identify or suppress. The landing zone that had been completely untenable 3 minutes ago was now dangerous but survivable. Eagle Flight, Reaper 6, LZ is being cleared by friendly sniper. We're moving wounded to extraction point. Request immediate pickup. The helicopter pilots had been monitoring the situation, waiting for any opportunity to extract the trapped Rangers. Reaper 6, Eagle Flight, we heard that firing. Is someone really clearing that LZ with precision fire? Eagle Flight, affirmative. Shadow 7 has eliminated all heavy weapons and is suppressing remaining hostiles. We need immediate extraction while the window is open. Copy Reaper 6. Inbound now. ETA 2 minutes. Barnes continued engaging targets, preventing any enemy fighter from establishing a position that could threaten the helicopters. She was down to 4 magazines for her M4, approximately 120 rounds. But the enemy was disorganized now, their effective strength reduced by the elimination of their heavy weapons in key positions. She saw 3 fighters trying to set up an improvised position with good angles on the LZ. Switched back to her Barrett, 7th round eliminated the position and the fighters using it. 3 rounds remaining in the Barrett, 4 M4 magazines, enough to keep suppressing until the extraction was complete. The helicopters appeared, 2 Blackhawks coming in fast and low, door gunners ready to engage any threats. Barnes coordinated with them over the radio, calling out remaining enemy positions, ensuring they knew where friendly forces were located versus hostiles. The Rangers reached the LZ carrying their 4 wounded. Morrison was last, providing rear security as his men loaded into the helicopters. Barnes covered them, engaging any enemy fighter who tried to interfere with the extraction. One fighter, braver or more determined than the others, made a run at the LZ with what looked like an explosive vest. Barnes identified the threat, shifted her Barrett, led the running target by 3 body lengths to account for his speed and the 700-meter range, and fired her 8th round. The fighter dropped 30 meters from the nearest helicopter, the explosive vest detonating harmlessly away from friendly forces, but with enough force to create a crater and eliminate 2 other fighters who'd been providing cover. 2 rounds remaining in the Barrett, the helicopters were loading, rotors never stopping, the pilots maintaining hover while Rangers and wounded were secured. Shadow 7, Reaper 6, all personnel loaded. We're extracting. What's your extraction plan? Barnes smiled. Reaper 6, I've got 3 clicks to my pickup point and approximately 15 angry fighters who know generally where I am. I'll manage. Negative, Shadow 7, you just saved 12 Rangers. We're not leaving you. Give us your position. We're coming to get you. Reaper 6, you've got 4 wounded who need immediate medical attention. Complete your extraction. I'll walk out. I've done it before. There was a pause. Then Morrison's voice came back with the kind of command authority that came from officers who wouldn't leave people behind. Shadow 7, that's an order. Mark your position. We're extracting you. Barnes could have argued, could have insisted on walking out solo as she'd done on multiple operations. But Morrison was right. The Rangers had a debt, and more practically, consolidating extraction made tactical sense. Copy Reaper 6, marking position now. She activated her IR strobe, creating a beacon visible to the helicopter systems, but not to enemy fighters on the ground. Shadow 7, Eagle 2 is diverting to your position. 30 seconds out. Can you suppress for 30 seconds? Eagle 2, affirmative, suppressing now. Barnes stood up, breaking cover, exposing herself, drawing fire from the remaining enemy fighters who'd been unable to get clear shots while she'd been behind rocks. They shot at her from multiple positions, AK-47 rounds impacting around her position, 1 round so close it kicked up rock fragments that stung her face. She shot back with her M4, not trying for precision kills, but for suppressive fire that kept them ducking while the helicopter approached her position. Her marksmanship training made even suppressive fire deadly. 3 fighters dropped from what they'd thought was random covering fire because Barnes's suppression was still more accurate than most shooters' aimed fire. Eagle 2 came in fast, nose high, flaring hard to arrest forward momentum, door gunner putting rounds downrange to cover Barnes's extraction. She grabbed her Barrett, sprinted for the helicopter, covered 15 meters in 3 seconds while carrying 60 pounds of gear, and dove through the door as the aircraft lifted off immediately. The door gunner kept firing as they gained altitude, suppressing any enemy fighters who thought about engaging the departing helicopter. Barnes secured her Barrett, made sure her gear was stowed, and finally allowed herself to breathe normally after 15 minutes of the most intense combat shooting of her career. Morrison was there, looking at her with an expression that mixed gratitude, disbelief, and professional respect. "Shadow 7, I need to know who you are and how the hell you did that." Barnes extended her hand. "Staff Sergeant Emilia Barnes, JSOC sniper element, and I did that with a Barrett M82, favorable shooting position, and 10 rounds that I made count." Morrison shook her hand firmly. 10 rounds. You eliminated at least 6 heavy weapons positions and suppressed 30 fighters enough to make extraction possible. That's not just good shooting. That's impossible shooting. Lieutenant, 2 things I've learned in this job. 1, nothing's impossible if you have the right tools and training. 2, the Barrett doesn't care how good their cover is. I wasn't shooting at people, I was shooting through their cover at people. Big difference. One of the other Rangers, a younger specialist with a bandaged arm, spoke up. "Ma'am, we heard you running with that Barrett. How do you even move with that weapon? It weighs more than most people can carry standing still." Barnes smiled. "Powerlifting and ultra-marathons. The Barrett's heavy, but I've trained carrying weight for years. When you can deadlift 300 pounds, 32 pounds of rifle is manageable. Plus, the alternative was letting you guys die, and that wasn't acceptable." Morrison was studying her with the kind of assessment that came from experienced operators recognizing exceptional capability. "Barnes, you're JSOC? What unit?" "Can't say, sir, but I do long-range precision work, usually solo operations, occasionally supporting conventional forces when situations require it." "Well, whatever unit you're with, they trained you right. You just did what I would have said was tactically impossible. Cleared a hot LZ with precision fire. I've been in the Army 12 years, 3 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Never seen anything like that." Barnes didn't know how to respond to that. She'd done her job, used her training, achieved the mission objective. That was what operators did. "Sir, you gave good radio communication, clear information, professional updates, made my job easier, good leadership under pressure. The flight back to base took 20 minutes, crossing from the Iraqi-Syrian border region back into secure territory. The wounded Rangers received immediate medical attention, 2 with shrapnel wounds from grenade fragments, 1 with a gunshot to the leg that had missed the femoral artery by centimeters, 1 with a concussion from an explosion that had nearly killed him. All would survive thanks to extraction happening before their tactical situation completely collapsed. Barnes separated from the Ranger team when they landed, heading to different debriefing facilities because JSOC assets didn't typically debrief with conventional units. But before she left, Morrison stopped her. "Barnes, I'm writing this up in my after-action report. What you did today saved 12 Rangers. That's not something that gets forgotten. I'm putting you in for a commendation." "Sir, I'd prefer you didn't. I do classified work. Public recognition creates complications." "Then I'll make sure it goes through classified channels. But somebody needs to know what you did. Somebody needs to recognize that one shooter with a Barrett just accomplished what we thought would take artillery or airstrikes. That's worth documenting." Barnes nodded. "Understood, sir. Thank you for the extraction. Could have walked out, but consolidating made better tactical sense. Barnes, we don't leave people behind who saved our lives. That's not how Rangers work." She smiled. "Notice that, sir. Appreciate the professional courtesy." The after-action reports described a situation where a trapped Ranger patrol was extracted through precision fire support provided by a classified asset operating independently in the Iraqi-Syrian border region. Staff Sergeant Barnes was credited with eliminating 6 crew-served weapons positions, suppressing approximately 30 enemy fighters, and maintaining fire superiority long enough for helicopter extraction of 12 Rangers and 4 wounded. She was awarded the Silver Star through classified channels, the citation carefully worded to avoid operational details, while acknowledging that extraordinary precision shooting had prevented what would have been a catastrophic loss of American lives in a cross-border operation that was already politically sensitive. Barnes didn't feel particularly heroic. She'd been in the right position with the right weapon when a situation developed. She'd used training that the Army had provided and skills she'd developed through years of competitive shooting and physical preparation. The Barrett had done what Barretts do: penetrate barriers and eliminate threats that conventional weapons couldn't handle. But within JSOC, the story spread about the sniper who'd cleared a hot LZ with 10 rounds from a Barrett, about the operator who'd sprinted 3 kilometers with a 32-pound rifle and enough gear to outfit most soldiers, then proceeded to dismantle a prepared defensive position through precision shooting that seemed impossible. 6 months later, Barnes was teaching a precision shooting course for JSOC operators. During the section on the Barrett M82, one of the students asked about maximum effective applications of the weapon. Barnes had set up a scenario. Picture this: 12 Rangers pinned, 4 wounded, extraction impossible because the only LZ is covered by multiple heavy weapons in hardened positions. You're 3 clicks away with a Barrett, 10 rounds, and nobody else coming to help. What do you do? Most students had looked uncomfortable, recognizing an impossible scenario. One said, "Request air support or artillery." "Not available. What do you do?" Another student, "That's not a tactical problem. That's a physics problem. One shooter can't clear multiple hardened positions." Barnes had smiled. "Wrong. One shooter with the right weapon, right training, and right mindset can reshape a battlefield. The Barrett doesn't care about your enemy's cover. You're not shooting at people behind walls. You're shooting through walls at people. Change your thinking. Change your capabilities." She'd then walked them through the actual engagement, how she'd identified the load-bearing structures, where she'd aimed to penetrate and deflect rounds, how she'd eliminated crew-served weapons by targeting the weapons rather than always targeting the crews, how 10 rounds had accomplished what conventional tactics said would require sustained fire from multiple platforms. The students had been skeptical until she'd shown them the actual engagement footage from her helmet camera. Watching her systematically dismantle a prepared defensive position with 10 precision shots, they'd understood that sometimes the difference between impossible and accomplished was just a matter of having the right tool and knowing how to use it beyond conventional limitations. "The Barrett is not just a rifle," Barnes had told them. "It's a tool for solving tactical problems that conventional weapons can't address. But you have to train with it, understand its capabilities, and be willing to do things that the manual says are difficult or inadvisable, like carrying it at a sprint for 3 clicks, or shooting through structural elements to hit targets behind cover, or prioritizing weapons over people in target selection." One student had asked, "Staff Sergeant, have you ever failed to make a shot that mattered?" Barnes had been quiet for a moment, remembering times when she hadn't been in position, when extraction hadn't happened in time, when precision shooting hadn't been enough. "Yes, multiple times. The difference between the mission we're discussing and the ones that don't succeed is usually about 4 factors: position, preparation, capability, and timing. If you have all 4 aligned, you can accomplish what seems impossible. If you're missing even one, you might fail regardless of skill." And the mission with the Rangers had all 4 aligned? "I was in position, 3 clicks away with line of sight to the LZ. I was prepared. I'd trained carrying the Barrett at speed, specifically for situations where mobility mattered. I had capability. The Barrett could defeat their hardened positions in ways conventional rifles couldn't. And timing worked. I reached my shooting position with just enough time to engage before the Rangers were overrun. All 4 factors aligned. That doesn't happen often." The course had continued, with Barnes teaching operators how to maximize Barrett employment in situations that required mobile deployment, how to prioritize targets when ammunition was limited, how to shoot through barriers by understanding material properties and penetration mechanics. Her teaching was informed by experience that most instructors didn't have, actual combat employment of techniques that existed more in theory than practice for most shooters. 3 years later, Barnes retired from active duty after a career that included 73 confirmed eliminations of high-value targets, numerous missions supporting conventional forces in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and undisclosed locations, and a reputation within JSOC as one of the most effective long-range precision shooters in the command. She'd never sought recognition, never publicized her missions, never appeared in the documentaries or books about special operations. But the Rangers who'd been extracted from that Iraqi-Syrian border village never forgot. Morrison went on to command his own Ranger company and eventually a battalion. Every briefing he gave about tactics under pressure included discussion of the time a JSOC sniper cleared an impossible LZ'd with 10 rounds from a Barrett. He never mentioned Barnes by name. Classified operational security prevented that, but he always emphasized the lesson that sometimes impossible was just a matter of having the right person with the right tool in the right place. The lesson wasn't about superhuman capability. It was about what happened when exceptional training met favorable circumstances, met a refusal to accept conventional limitations. Barnes had trained for years to be able to move with heavy weapons at speed. She'd studied barrier penetration and material properties to understand how to defeat hardened positions. She'd practiced with the Barrett enough to be completely confident in its capabilities and her ability to employ it under stress. When the situation developed, when 12 Rangers needed extraction from a hot LZ that conventional wisdom said couldn't be cleared by one shooter, she'd been ready. Not because she was superhuman, but because she'd prepared for exactly that kind of extreme situation through training that most operators never pursued. The Rangers had whispered that extraction was impossible. They'd been wrong. Extraction wasn't impossible. It just required someone who'd trained beyond standard capabilities and who refused to accept that conventional limitations applied to her employment of a weapon system that was specifically designed to exceed those limitations. Emilia Barnes, the sniper who cleared the impossible LZ, the operator who demonstrated that 10 rounds from a Barrett in the right hands could accomplish what entire platoons couldn't achieve through conventional means. She'd appeared when they needed her most, with a weapon that could reshape the battlefield, and had proven that sometimes one person with exceptional training and the right tool could change outcomes that everyone else had accepted as inevitable. The Barrett had spoken 10 times. Each time it spoke, it solved a problem that conventional weapons couldn't address. And when those 10 rounds were expended, 12 Rangers were alive who would have died without that precision intervention. That was the mission. That was the capability. That was what happened when you had someone who'd trained for impossible situations and who had the tools and skills to make impossible become inevitable. Every single time they whispered impossible, someone like Barnes appeared to prove them wrong. Because in special operations, impossible was just another word for requires someone who trained harder than everyone else thought necessary. Staff Sergeant Emilia Barnes, the operator who cleared the LZ when extraction was impossible, the sniper who proved that 10 rounds from a Barrett mattered more than 300 rounds from conventional rifles when employed with precision that exceeded normal human capability. The Rangers had been trapped in that Middle Eastern border region where Iraq met Syria. The LZ had been impossible. Then she'd appeared, and everything had changed. Because that's what happens when the right person with the right weapon shows up at the right time. Impossible becomes inevitable. Defeat becomes victory. And people who were about to die go home to their families instead. Years after retirement, Barnes received an unexpected package. Inside was a photograph, 12 Rangers standing at a reunion holding a banner that read, Reaper 6, Reunion 2024, 12 Rangers, 10 rounds, 1 Angel. Below it, a handwritten note from Morrison, now a colonel. Barnes, every man in this photo is alive because you refuse to accept impossible. 6 of us have kids now. 3 got married after that day. One finished medical school, another started a business. We've lived 147 combined years since you cleared that LZ. Our families know the story. Not your name, but what you did. My daughter asked me once what a hero looks like. I told her about a soldier who ran 3 kilometers with a rifle that weighs more than most people can lift, then proceeded to accomplish what everyone said couldn't be done. Thank you for giving us our futures back. James Morrison. Barnes kept the photograph on her desk, not as a trophy, she'd never seen it that way, but as a reminder of why the training mattered, why pushing beyond standard limits mattered, why being ready for the impossible situation mattered. Because somewhere, right now, there was another situation developing, another team pinned down, another LZ that conventional wisdom said couldn't be cleared, another group of professionals whispering that extraction was impossible, and somewhere there was another operator who'd trained harder than necessary, who'd prepared for situations that might never come, who'd refused to accept that impossible meant anything other than requires exceptional capability. That operator would hear the call, would grab their weapon, would move toward the sound of guns when everyone else was moving away, would arrive at exactly the moment when hope was fading and demonstrate that sometimes one person with the right tools and training could reshape reality. Barnes had been that operator once, had proven that 10 rounds from a Barrett could save 12 lives, had demonstrated that impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. The lesson endured, the capability existed. The next generation of operators trained with her methods, studied her engagements, prepared for their own impossible moments. Because in special operations, impossible wasn't the end of the conversation. It was the beginning of the solution. And that solution always started with someone who'd trained beyond standard requirements and who refused to accept that circumstances determined outcomes. Extraction wasn't impossible. It just required Emilia Barnes with a Barrett and 10 rounds that changed everything, every single time. Thanks for watching. Every woman has a story worth telling. Join us to hear them all.